Joining me now from Beijing is Victor Gao. He's chair professor at the Soochow University in Suzhou, and he was also interpreter for Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping and has a deep understanding of the Communist Party. Victor Gao, welcome. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has said Indian forces, quote, provoked and attacked Chinese personnel in the Galwan Valley in Ladakh, where this violent incident happened. So this is all India's fault, is it?
Well, first of all, it is very unfortunate for China and India to have this confrontation along the very long, very arduous border. Secondly, the fact that deaths occurred on both sides is extremely unfortunate. And third point is that fortunately, no guns have been fired between the troops of the two countries. And from the Chinese perspective, of top priority is to calm down and to de-escalate. And neither China nor India want to have a war between the two largest populations in the world. A war will be detrimental to both countries. And I think the top priority is to negotiate a peaceful settlement of the border conflict between the two countries.
There's lots to unpack here, but you said, you talked about deaths on both sides. China hasn't confirmed any reports of deaths on its side. What do you know?
Well, the fact that this did not involve any gunshots between the troops of the two countries is very significant. And I understand ever since the end of the Indian-China border clash in 1962, no gunfires had happened along the long border. And this time was no exception. This means that the two countries have been maximum restrained even when they come to blows with each other. And when you talk about bodily conflicts involving able-bodied soldiers, it is highly unusual that you will have injuries or even deaths on one side with nothing happening on the other side.
However, so there have been deaths on the Chinese side?
Not published. Well, I think the media reports indicate there have been deaths on both sides, but there has been no government official report on the Chinese side. But I would say any death on either side or on both sides is very, very unfortunate. And I personally would mourn the death of any soldier or officer killed in the brawl. Right. And I hope neither side will happen with this bodily injury against each other again.
Victor Gao, you spoke of a long and arduous border, but it's also a disputed border. Why then did Chinese troops enter the Galwan Valley, where this particular clash occurred, unilaterally in early May?
Well, you may know, before the British occupied the Indian subcontinent, India was a cluster of different states. And when the British Indian Empire was at the peak, it kept encroaching into China's Tibetan region. And this actually caused a lot of border disputes after the British left, especially because the British carved out this so-called McKay-Hong line, which successive Chinese governments have never recognized. And as of today, it is true that there are border disputes between China and India wanted to use the British line of demarcation between China and India, and China throughout the ages or through several successive Chinese governments have never recognized the legality of the McKay-Hong line. So I think it's up to China and India to use all their wisdom and foresight to come to a settlement of their land disputes between the two countries.
But that settlement hasn't been arrived at, is what I'm saying, Victor Gao. And therefore, it is a matter for bilateral discussion, something that you alluded to in your first answer. Therefore, my question is, why did Chinese troops unilaterally enter an area where they were last in 1962?
No, I don't think what you mentioned is accurate on the situation on the ground. China has been maintaining its part of the deal with the Indian side, and China from the very beginning has been urging no conflict, no bodily injury would happen, and China has been calling for maximum restraint. And the fact that China and India have never fired a single shot against each other ever since the end of the China-Indian border war in 1962.
That is incorrect. There were
both
shots fired in
sides
1967 and 1975. But aside from that, you keep talking about no shots being fired. That is because of confidence-building measures, CBMs, that exist between the Chinese army and the Indian army. And they lay out quite clearly that no firearms are to be used in these engagements. That is the reason why no shots have been fired, is it not?
Yes, indeed. That actually means that both China and India can exercise maximum restraint in situations like this. And I hope this will continue to be the case. And both sides need to de-escalate and avoid further building up the tension.
You speak about de-escalation. There is a lot of anger and shock in India. What is the message from China to India today?
Well, I think the message is undoubtedly a message of peace, because both China and India want to develop. Both countries want to really avoid any kind of mid-income trap which have befallen on many emerging markets in the world in recent decades. And China and India, being the two largest populations in the world, can only get along with each other rather than fall into a trap of traditional hostility, eventually even engulfing themselves with the great tragedy of war, for example. China and India had a war. It was very bitter, and it did not leave a very good legacy for quite a few decades.
Speaking of that legacy,
any flaring up of conflict will be bad for the two nations.
Speaking of that legacy and this deadliest clash in more than 40 years, do you think China-India ties can actually recover?
Absolutely. I'm very, very confident about the future of relations between China and India. Why? Because these two are the largest populations in the world. China with 1.4 billion, India with 1.3 billion. For these two countries not to get along and to engage in war against each other will be calamities for both China and India, as well as for world peace. Therefore, anyone with decency of mind will need to promote peace and stability and harmony between China and India. There is no other way for these two great countries to move forward.
Victor Gao, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.